Why real dark chosen ones carry a bit of demonic vibration on purpose. What if I told you that the most spiritually powerful beings on this earth carry something deliberately unsettling within them? Not evil, not corruption, but a very specific, calibrated vibration that most would call demonic, and they do it on purpose. Not as a rebellion against the light, not as a flirtation with sin, but as a key, an ancient, volatile, misunderstood key to a level of power that no sanitized spiritual path can unlock. We've been trained, all of us, to associate the word dark with danger, deception, or destruction. But what if darkness, in its purest form, is not the enemy of light, but its necessary partner? What if real spiritual mastery doesn't mean escaping darkness, but integrating it so fully that you become untouchable by both extremes? There's a reason real dark chosen ones don't wear halos. They don't always speak with soft, poetic words or radiate blissful compassion. When you meet one, you might feel uneasy at first, your nervous system might tighten, your instincts might flare. And that's not because they're evil. It's because they carry a frequency most people spend their entire lives avoiding: raw, unfiltered primal truth. You feel it like a storm about to break. It's the vibration of someone who has descended into their own shadow and returned not just with light, but with the power to wield both light and shadow in service of something greater than either. How should we evaluate this most precious time ever in our...
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
This is the part of the spiritual journey that no one talks about on Instagram. It doesn't look good in a filtered post. It doesn't sell crystal kits or chakra t-shirts, but it's real. And if you're still watching this, you already know that some part of you has felt it. Maybe you've seen it in yourself, a rage that can't be purified away, a darkness that no mantra can dissolve. And instead of exiling it, maybe you're starting to realize it's there for a reason. You see, the demonic vibration isn't a possession, it's not a curse, it's a current, a frequency of raw, unrefined creative force. When misunderstood or uncontrolled, it destroys. But when harnessed by a soul who's been through the fire, who's died to ego, who has no desire for domination, only alignment, it becomes fuel. It becomes a sacred power source, and that's why the real ones, the real dark chosen ones, carry just a trace of it, because they've earned the right to, because they've wrestled with it, made peace with it, and now command it, not to harm, but to heal. Let's get honest. The spiritual path is not all love and light. That's a lie sold to keep people docile. Real awakening means seeing everything clearly, especially the parts of yourself that scare you, the anger, the lust, the hunger for power, the envy, the parts you were taught to suppress, to shame, to hide. But hiding doesn't transmute. Denial doesn't liberate. These energies don't disappear. They fester and then they leak out sideways. Passive aggression, spiritual superiority, manipulation disguised as kindness. But the dark chosen ones? They don't play that game. They go straight to the source. They walk into the cave and sit with the dragon. They don't kill it, they listen to it. And in that listening, something alchemical happens. The very energy that once threatened to consume them now obeys them. And that creates a presence so powerful, so undeniable, that it doesn't need to convince anyone. It simply is. And I want to ask you something. What part of you are you still hiding because someone told you it wasn't spiritual enough? What if that part is the very gatekeeper to your next evolution? What if your power has been waiting all this time in the places you were told to avoid? People mistake the demonic current as inherently evil because they've never met it in its purified form. But the ancients knew better. In nearly every indigenous tradition, there are spirits of chaos, of shadow, of destruction, not to be worshipped, not to be feared, but to be understood. Because destruction is not always evil. Sometimes it's necessary. Sometimes the old structures have to burn so the new ones can rise. Sometimes your identity has to be shattered so your soul can speak. And who better to guide you through that than someone who's already been there? The ones who carry this vibration have often been through unspeakable suffering. They've faced death, physical, emotional, spiritual. They've been betrayed, abandoned, exiled. And through that exile, they found something most people never touch: the source code, the raw blueprint of creation that lies beneath morality, beneath duality, beneath even love. It is the void, the womb of all things. And when a soul meets that void and doesn't run, doesn't flinch, doesn't beg to be rescued, they return with authority. Real authority, not the kind that needs a title or a following, the kind that makes reality itself bend around them. So yes, they carry a bit of the demonic, on purpose, not because they serve darkness, but because they've mastered it, because they've integrated it, because they know that to be a complete being, you must hold both the Creator and the Destroyer inside you and bow to neither. Only then can you serve the truth. Only then can you be trusted with power that can't be corrupted. And this is why no religion can contain them. No spiritual system can explain them. They are anomalies, violations of the sacred order, yet the very existence of that violation reveals a deeper truth. Maybe the order itself was never complete. So I ask you, not as a challenge, but as an invitation. What would it mean for you to stop running from your darkness? What would happen if you didn't just heal it, but harnessed it? That's where we began. Weaponized purity. Why light without darkness becomes powerless. We've all been told the story, be pure, be light, be good. From childhood, we're programmed to aspire toward an image of holiness that's spotless, uncontaminated, untouched by shadow. And yet, if you've walked the spiritual path with open eyes, you already know something feels off about that narrative. It's not that purity is wrong, it's that purity, when disconnected from power, becomes weakness. Worse, it becomes weaponized, a mask, a performance, a form of spiritual bypassing that avoids the very work required for true transformation. And when that happens, light becomes impotent. It glows, but it doesn't burn through. It comforts, but it doesn't liberate. That's why the real ones, the dark chosen ones, carry a bit of the forbidden current, because they understand the secret most avoid. Light without darkness cannot penetrate the deep. Let's get brutally honest. Most people who radiate only light often crumble when tested. They preach love until they're challenged. They speak of forgiveness until their ego is bruised. They shine beautifully in safe spaces, but when the storm comes, they panic. Why? Because their light was cultivated in isolation from the shadow. It was curated, not embodied. It was learned, not lived. And that kind of light is brittle. It shatters under pressure. But the light forged in darkness, that light is nuclear. It doesn't flicker when the wind blows, it expands. This is why the dark chosen ones are feared, not because they harm, but because they can't be manipulated. Their light doesn't come from spiritual ideology, it comes from integration. They've earned it, and they carry just enough of the demonic code to ensure their power doesn't become performative. That trace of shadow acts like spiritual gravity. It keeps them grounded, real, raw. It stops them from floating into self-righteousness or spiritual ego. They don't need to pretend to be saints because they've already faced their inner demons and walked out with sovereignty. And here's the paradox: people feel safer around them, even though they might not understand why. It's because their presence carries both mercy and fire. You know they won't judge you, but they won't lie to you either. They won't coddle your illusions, they won't pretend to be something they're not. That's rare, that's sacred, that's real. And in a world addicted to appearances, realness feels like divinity. I want to ask you something that might shake you. What if your obsession with being good is the very thing keeping you small? What if your fear of being misunderstood, of being seen as too intense, too dark, or too much, is actually blocking your soul from completing its alchemy? We've all been fed a binary. Light is holy, dark is dangerous. But in truth, both are teachers. Both are sacred. The universe itself is woven from polarity, sun and moon, inhale and exhale, creation and destruction. And if we only worship one side, we cut ourselves off from half our power. The dark chosen ones know this. That's why they don't flinch when things get heavy. They don't spiritualize away their anger, their grief, or their primal instincts. They spiritualize away their anger, their grief, or their primal instinct. They work with them, they transmute them, they invite them into the temple, not as masters, but as messengers. And here's what most people miss. What you repress owns you. What you integrate serves you. So when you see someone who's carrying a bit of that demonic vibration, but with clarity, compassion, and inner stillness, know this. You're witnessing someone who has turned their shadow into a sword, not to harm, but to cut through illusion. They don't just talk about healing, they embody it. They don't need to prove their light because their darkness has been tamed. That's real authority. So maybe the question isn't, how can I stay pure? Maybe the real question is, what am I afraid will happen if I stop pretending to be pure? What would you find if you went into your rage instead of suppressing it? What gift is hiding beneath your shame, your lust, your grief? Can you imagine the power waiting for you in the very thing you're running from? Let's be clear. This isn't about glorifying darkness. It's about recognizing that without it, your light will never be whole. And if your light isn't whole, your power will always be fragile. The ones who walk between worlds, who can hold both the divine and the demonic without collapsing. That's who you feel in your bones. Because they've done what few dare to do. They've stopped running. They've turned around, they've faced it, and now nothing owns them. That's what real spiritual freedom looks like. Not perfection, not purity, integration. The sacred rebel code, why true chosen ones must break the system to serve the soul. There's a silent agreement most people make without realizing it. It's the agreement to play by the rules of the system, to fit in just enough to be accepted, to dim just enough to stay safe. But true chosen ones, especially the dark ones, don't sign that contract. They can't. Their soul won't let them. There's something encoded deep within that rejects conformity not out of arrogance, but out of integrity. They don't rebel to be rebellious. They rebel because the system itself is built to keep souls asleep, and their mission is to wake people up. To do that, they must first break every illusion the system depends on, including the illusion of goodness, of purity, of doing it the right way. They are spiritual insurgents, sacred rebels, and their presence is disruptive by design. To awaken a soul, you have to disturb the ego, and the ego hates to be disturbed. It clings to comfort, to identity, to rules that make life seem predictable, even if those rules are killing the soul from the inside. The dark chosen ones walk into this fragile structure and press against the seams. They speak the unspeakable, they challenge the inviolable, they question the unquestioned. And because of that, they are often demonized, not because they're wrong, but because they're right too early. Their truth is ahead of its time. Their vibration exposes the distortions others have built their entire lives around. And when you expose a lie that someone calls God, you will be crucified for it. But here's the thing, they don't care. Not in the sense of being cold or egotistical, but in the deeper sense of having already died to the need for approval. You can't shame someone who's already faced their worst fears. You can't exile someone who's already walked alone. You can't threaten someone who doesn't need anything from you. That's why their power is terrifying to institutions, because they can't be bought, controlled, or co-opted. They are loyal only to the truth, and truth by its nature destroys illusions. Every single time. Have you ever felt that pull inside you to say what no one else will say, to walk a different path, to disrupt something that everyone else just tolerates? That's not rebellion for rebellion's sake. That's your soul remembering its original frequency. And if you've ignored it, if you've silenced it to keep the peace, you already know the cost. It eats you alive from the inside, because the moment you betray your truth to stay comfortable, you start dying, spiritually, energetically, creatively. And that's what the system counts on. It counts on your silence, it counts on your shame, it counts on your fear of standing alone, but the dark chosen ones are immune to that manipulation. Why? Because they've already been through the collapse. They've already lost what was never real. They've already walked away from fake friendships, from shallow success, from roles that felt like cages. And in that loss, they found something most people will never touch. Sovereignty. The kind of sovereignty that doesn't need to be validated, that doesn't need to be liked, that doesn't even need to be understood. It just is. And here's the wild part. The very thing that made them outcasts becomes the source of their sacred authority. The very traits that were too much, too intense, too raw for the system are exactly what make them leaders in the new paradigm. They're not trying to lead, though. They're just being fully themselves. And that is leadership, because when someone stands in their truth without apology, it gives everyone permission to do the same. Let me ask you something uncomfortable. How many times have you shrunk yourself to avoid judgment? How many times have you swallowed your truth because you knew it would upset the room? And what would happen if you stopped? Not in anger, not in rebellion, but in reverence. Reverence for your own soul's instructions. Because that's what the Sacred Rebel Code is about. Not chaos, not anarchy. It's about sacred soul disruption. It's about burning false temples so real ones can rise. It's about saying, I will not betray myself just to belong to a world that has lost its way. And yes, it's costly. You will lose people. You will trigger others. You will be called names, labeled, but you will gain something far more precious. Your essence, your clarity, your fire. And once that fire is lit, you become unstoppable, not because you're invincible, but because you're aligned, and alignment is the highest protection there is. So when you see someone walking this path, unapologetic, raw, with that trace of sacred darkness in their eyes, know this: they are not dangerous, they are free. And freedom, to a world built on control, will always look like a threat. But to those who are ready to awaken, it looks like home. The God frequency. Why darkness, when aligned, becomes the channel for divine authority. When we speak of divine authority, most imagine a serene, glowing figure cloaked in white, untouched by the grit of life, floating above pain, desire, and all things chaotic. But that image is a myth. Real divine authority doesn't float. It stands, it bleeds, it burns. It bends reality not by avoiding the dark, but by commanding it. The deepest spiritual truth is this: darkness, when aligned, becomes the most potent channel for divine energy, and the rarest beings on this planet, the true dark chosen ones, carry that current not as a burden, but as a sacred technology. You see, the divine is not only found in the light, it is found in the totality, in the scream as much as the silence, in the void as much as the vision. And when a soul has walked through enough hell, when it has faced its own monstrosity without flinching, when it has kissed the feet of its own madness and still chosen love, something begins to shift. The nervous system calibrates to a new level of reality. The vessel becomes strong enough to hold paradox. And in that paradox, divinity descends. Not the sanitized version, the real one. The God frequency. The God frequency isn't calm. It isn't polite. It doesn't follow your rules. It is the rule. When it moves through someone, you feel it, not just in your ears, but in your bones. It's the kind of presence that silences a room without saying a word, not because it's trying to dominate, but because it carries an ancient resonance. The vibration of someone who has remembered who they actually are. And here's the secret: that frequency cannot move through a vessel that's afraid of its own shadow. Light is safe, darkness is sacred. The world has inverted this truth, but the dark chosen ones remember. They know that the shadow isn't the enemy, it's the gate. And if you avoid the gate, you never access the throne. That's why their vibration feels different. It's not just love, it's feral love. It's not peace that avoids conflict. It's peace that includes conflict and still chooses presence. That's the kind of peace that changes lives, not the kind that whispers affirmations while the soul rots in silence. To carry the God frequency is to be a vessel of divine contradiction. You must be soft and brutal, humble and sovereign, empty and overflowing. You must be willing to die to yourself again and again, not for performance, but because every layer of ego burned away makes room for something vaster to move through you. And when that vastness comes, it doesn't ask for permission. It rewrites your nervous system. It tears apart your life so it can rebuild it on unshakable ground. Ask yourself this: Are you willing to let go of being good if it means becoming real? Are you willing to be misunderstood, feared, even hated, if it means letting divine truth speak through you without censorship? Because that's the price, and it's also the miracle. When you stop performing purity and start embodying totality, you become a portal, and through that portal moves something that no religion, no book, no teacher can ever fully capture: the raw, living presence of God. The world doesn't need more light workers who are afraid of the dark. It needs storm bearers, threshold keepers, souls who have walked through the underworld and returned with medicine that no temple can teach. It needs those who carry just enough of the demonic current to not be seduced by it, but to command it, to shape it, to wield it like a sacred blade in the service of the holy. The dark chosen ones are not here to be followed. They're here to awaken you, to reflect back the parts of you you've buried, to remind you that your power doesn't come from perfection, it comes from integration, from standing in the center of your paradox and saying, "I am all of it, and none of it owns me." That is the God frequency, and it is not reserved for saints. It is available to all, if you're willing to walk into your own darkness and find divinity there. So the final question is this: are you still trying to escape your shadow, or are you ready to become the kind of vessel that reality itself listens to? Because once you do, once you carry that trace of darkness with awareness, reverence, and love, you don't just speak truth anymore, you become it.